The syndicate itself was basically formed out of a group of lads from the north who went across to Ireland to buy a 3-mile chaser, and we set out on this journey. We had a fantastic journey. Our bloodstock agent Kevin Ross took us across. We went to Jessica Harrington's yard, we went round Mouse Morris's yard, various yards, sort of drunk in 4 days. We got back, we found what we thought was the perfect 3-mile chaser, and 4 of the guys basically didn't pay, which is the usual situation you find yourself in. And then, by chance, I was in the process of buying some corporate hospitality for Cheltenham that year, and I rang up a corporate entertainment company and started a long conversation with Hugh Doubtfire, who is now the other sort of dual shareholder in the syndicate. And ended up, he didn't actually sell me any corporate hospitality, but he bought a share in the chaser. And he had a long-standing school friend, Martin Maxted, and these guys had horses together for years, real Cheltenham buffs, loved it as much as I did, and Martin came in as well. And at a later stage, Martin's business partner, Carsten, came in, who's from Denmark, only horse he's ever owned in his life, so thinks this is an absolute dream. And the remaining member was a guy called Pete Williams, a carpet fitter, who stayed in. He's from up near Manchester. And then finally Mark Sheesby, who was also in corporate entertainment, who was a business associate of Hughes, came on board. So it was a disparate group, really. We didn't really know each other that well at all. It just fell together.
Well, they got in touch with me. Ian Robinson heads it, and just asked us. We had an earlier horse called Bobby Dazzler, who was a very good horse, but I'm afraid was ill-fated. And then the next one I got was Imperial Commander, so I've been very lucky.
The original partnership of Bobby Dazzler had 2 members who exited when Bobby died in a stable accident here at Nigel's, and he was a really special horse to us. I mean, he'd won 3 hurdle races. We had high hopes from. He jumped fences at home in tremendous fashion, and to lose him, that was a real low moment. At that point in time, really my thoughts were to pack it all in and give it up. And all credit to Kevin Ross, our bloodstock agent. He insisted I came to Ireland, and we went down to Lotham Moor, to Wilson Denison's yard, and we looked at all Wilson's horses as potential replacements. And it was wet, windy, it was sleet, it was foggy, you could hardly see the horses, and we watched about 30 or 40 horses go around, and nothing was really of interest. And Wilson's trainer Colin McKeever said to me, I've got a horse I think you'd like, but he's on antibiotics, so I can't work him, but we'll pop him over a couple of hurdles. And this thing came out the gloom, and that was Imperial Commander, and he was just, even then he was mind-blowing. I mean, he attacked hurdles at a pace which frightened everybody who stood there. And we bought him a few days later. We paid 30,000 sterling for him, and if I made my mind up on the day, he'd have been 25,000 sterling. But he was back in work by the time I finally made a decision, and then Colin began to realise what he had on his hands. He went back to Kevin Ross. In fairness, we looked after him, and we waited for a late season point on good ground. And Summer Hill is a nice track, it's 2 mile 4, you get good ground, and we took him there, and he absolutely romped Hull. And at that point in time, you think, well, he could be anything, and the dream is alive again. And then they were resurfacing the road outside Kevin's, and he does get a bit fresh when he comes back into training, and he kicked off and he fell on the surface, and they had grey stones on the road, loose grey stones, and it basically took his knees through to the bone. And we thought, well, there again, there's another dream gone sour. But Kevin's patience and his mother's patience, we got through it. I mean, the holes in the knees were unbelievable. They were packed with ointment every day, and gradually they healed over, and they've never bothered him since. We got the dream back on track, and he came straight out of a field in Ireland, and 7 weeks after coming to Nigel, he won the bumper at Cheltenham.
We were very hopeful that he was going to run a good race, because Nigel thought he had him reasonably fit. Our problem with it obviously was the fact that we knew Snap Tie was in the race, and we knew how highly rated he was. So it wasn't a big gambling event, it was quite simply just a let's see. The dream had always been for Hugh and myself, as 2 of the sort of old friends that form part of the partnership, to have a horse that was going to run at Cheltenham. So we fulfilled the dream as he walked out on the day. And of course, when he came back 8 lengths clear, the dream had rather gone haywire. Had to reevaluate life after that for a few days, trying to work out what the dreams are going to be after that. My wife and family are actually in France at the time, so I was giving them a commentary over the phone, which is probably illegal, so I shouldn't be saying this at the moment. But anyway, I was giving them a commentary, and I can't repeat on air exactly what I said when he quickened as they came down the hill, but it was a bit of a shock. And he's sort of developed that trademark scoot around the corner at Cheltenham, and when he's up for it, then he's almost impossible to stop. I don't think he exerted himself over hurdles. I don't think he really put it in. He jumped very big. He always jumped very large, and I don't think it was really a sport that he felt quite the same about. He seemed to love the cut of a fence. His first race, he took on Mercedes Maguire and Wichita Lineman, and I think Juvignon, Nicky Henderson's horse, was third, and he was fourth. Now, at the time, we didn't realise quite how good Mercedes Maguire and Wichita Lineman were. But when you look back, then actually it was an incredible performance for a first run over hurdles. His second run then was at Newcastle, and he did exceptionally well there. Have to be pleased. He cantered away from everything, and we knew he was a good horse. Then, obviously, we had the RSA, and that was, I think it was the RSA in those days. Anyway, that was a big challenge. But again, he was bang there. Coming down the hill, he was still in the race. As Mercedes Maguire and Wichita Lineman, as dedicated hurdlers really, sprinted. We got tap for toe. So we went to Aintree with a little bit of hope, a little bit of a dream. And again, he stayed on really well. And again, I think there he started to show that he really loved the staying game.
Well, he did very well the whole of the first season, and just did nothing but improve.
That was something that we thought, really should be his game. He schooled really well, and Tony gave him an absolutely great ride. He looked after the horse. He didn't exert him, but the horses behind us weren't really quite of the same calibre. Paul Nicholls' horse Paolo Dancer came to us at the last, and it would have been interesting had he stood up, but unfortunately he didn't. So we'll never know. But in those days, whether he was a battler, we're not sure. We now know.
He won his first two chases with the greatest of ease at Cheltenham. His third run, he just hurt himself behind in the chase. He finished, I think, third or fourth. We were all very disappointed by then, but then we found out afterwards he was wrong behind. He had a long time off.
Basically, we don't really know exactly what happened in the race. He hurt his back. It was very clear from the first couple of jumps. He was skewing in the air and he was landing awkwardly, and there was no zest. So he was clearly not right. Tony said that a couple of times he picked up during the race, and that's why he kept on. But at the end of it, the horse was not at his best, and certainly was in some sort of pain. So we got him under the vets. They manipulated his back. They found that he had problems at the top of his hind legs, and an issue with a hock was discovered at the same time. And that's been a course of treatment ever since, basically.
I don't get to sit on him that much at home, but I remember sitting on him about 3 weeks before the Paddy Power. We schooled him over 5 fences, and he definitely felt above average on that day. It was a pretty special feeling.
Well, I think that we felt that the horse was very well handicapped, and in hindsight, obviously off a mark of 139, he had a very, very big chance indeed. But at the time, you're always a little bit nervous. We'd had a bit of a problem with the horse, and coming into it after a long break, we didn't know, as we do now, that the horse, runs very, very well fresh, and he's got an almost perfect record fresh. But I think we were pretty bullish about it, and we thought he was well handicapped, and I think that he won like a well handicapped horse.
Well, it was pretty straightforward. You say a high piece, he went wrong the season before, so he missed the back end. So I was coming to ride him on the back of a pulled up. So that always takes a bit of pressure off. But Nigel is pretty straightforward to ride for. He didn't give me much instructions except just to keep it simple. He thought he was the best horse in the race. And I remember jumping off, and within 4 fences I knew I was riding something that I'd never ridden before. It was absolutely amazing.
I mean, he travels ever so well, he's got speed, and at the time, you know, we felt that he did have the stamina. There were some doubts, or have been some doubts, but Nigel's always been pretty determined that he will stay, and I think the way he came up the hill in the Paddy Power proved that he did stay.
He travelled almost too well. I jumped to the front, first down the back, which is a long way out in Cheltenham. It's not ideal, but the race wasn't carrying him for long enough, and I was just letting him use his stride. And yeah, as I say, he just came into the race effortlessly, and he won like a proper horse. And what was most impressive was he did get tired as well, so I thought there would be a lot of improvement in him. I'd made a statement pulling up in the Paddy Power that he was the best I'd ever ridden. It was a bold statement at the time because he was running off a mark of 139, I think. So obviously it was put your money where you mount it, if you like. But I thought he was really good, and I think we went from there to, we were meant to go back for the Boyle Sports, which, if you remember, was abandoned that season due to the heavy ground. So we're straight to King George from there.
Well, there's not much else to go for, really. That's you've got a good horse like that. He's putting himself out of handicaps. So the King George was the next thing. As I say, he's delicate. He was wrong that day, so he gave Cato Star a good run for a long time. But his lungs were wrong that day, so that's why he got beat.
King George couldn't do it any better. We jumped off, got a lovely position. Everything was going to plan. He jumped really well. Going out with the back, I thought I had a massive chance, and he stopped very quick, which is always worrying because you have to find a reason. And I don't know if there ever has been a reason, except Nigel's horse were probably not in top form at the time. But again, he gave me the indication that there was something there that was really to look forward to, and we had something serious on our hands.
Well, I think the King George may have been more of a stable form issue at that time, and that's how we sort of saw it. The stable weren't having too many winners, and I think it was sort of 1 from 50 or something like that. So it was difficult to be very confident in the King George, and I think it's always difficult. People say, well, he doesn't like going right-handed, it doesn't like the track. Well, that may be true, but you're never quite certain, and our feeling at the time was perhaps he wasn't as right as he can be.
I think the Ryanair Chase, thanks to Michael O'Leary, who flies us all over the world, was the making of Imperial Commander. It's one of the best races they've ever invented at Cheltenham, I think, because to come straight out of the back of a novice and go straight to the Gold Cup is a massive ask for a horse.
Nigel talked about both options, and that was the sort of case, I think, publicly, that we were looking at both races. But he was still a fairly lightly raced horse, fairly young, so we thought that we had a very good chance of winning the Ryanair, having won the Paddy Power over course and distance. He obviously loves Cheltenham. We knew that he would run well over that distance, and so we felt that it was the right decision to go for that at the time.
Cato Star and Denman was so much. It was the easier way out, rather than taking them on at that early stage of his career. If we'd been a bit braver, as it turns out now, we should have taken them on then. But we can't complain by winning a Ryanair.
I think it was a dream for 1 or 2 of the owners. I've been going to Cheltenham 25 years, and in fact, Martin and I had the sort of dream of having a festival winner. So it meant a huge amount to us to have that winner. I think when we went into this again, because we've sort of had horses since, well, I certainly had horses since I was 18, bits and pieces, so I've been on the long road, as it were, but to have a runner at the festival was something we were aspiring to, so to actually go on and win at the festival was amazing, and I'll never forget that moment.
The Ryanair just couldn't have come at a better time in Imperial Commander's career, and it was just brilliant sense by the trainers, the owners, and everyone that decided to go for that race. And I've no doubt saying here now, if he'd run in the Gold Cup that year, he may never have won a Gold Cup, because that's how much of a help that race was at that time of his career. It was on to Punchestown, where we were going back to 3 miles for the first time since the King George, and again, I'll never forget that year. It was bucketing down rain. Punchestown was really heavy ground, which we weren't worried about at the time, but it really took it out of him that day. He travelled almost too well. He went to the start really free, which he never normally does.
There were different views on the day One or two people saying maybe he didn't stay, other people saying that. I think we were surprised almost that it was on. I think some people said if it had been at Cheltenham, maybe it wouldn't have been on because, because it was raining all day, and the ground was atrocious. And Paddy certainly was of the view that perhaps he didn't really go in the ground that well because it was so bad. And I think that with all these things, you need to sort of think about the race and think about the situation afterwards, and you've got a bit more time rather than make a sort of knee-jerk reaction. But I think, whatever the reason, whether it was ground, whether it was going right-handed, I don't think we're certain.
It was probably one race too many that year for him, and again, he got very tired and he pulled up that day, and yes, you've got a lot of down faces, disappointments. You can think the dream is over for a little bit if you like, but it just didn't happen from that day. Richard Bevis rides him all the time at home, and obviously Nigel watches him most days on the gallop. I'm lucky enough to school him maybe once a season. John Frankham had the pleasure of doing it before the Gold Cup last year, and that's how often he schools, because he's a very athletic horse and he doesn't need a lot of schooling. But I had schooled him again before the Betfred, and he felt amazing. He always does. We school hundreds of horses here. On a Monday morning, Thursday morning, we school 30-40 horses, and when you sit in Imperial Commander, you're sitting on something a lot different to the average, and he'd certainly gave me that feel again at the start of that season.
We thought he was an improving horse, and he'd won the Ryanair, as we know, so we've got to go for it.
You're never confident against a horse like KO Star, but again, I was always thinking, if this horse shows to everyone, and especially myself, that he gets 3 mile, we have something really special on our hands, because he'd done everything over other trips, and that was the first day he really got everyone thinking.
I would say that we were optimistic rather than confident. When you're taking on a horse like Kato Star, you realise you're up against the very, very best that's around at the moment. So we were hoping, that we could run well against the horse, but it was an amazing feeling that we actually matched him. And, obviously we lost, but at the end of the day, it was an amazing feeling. And then it really came home in your mind that we actually had something very special.
I was obviously very impressed. He went into the straight, and I thought I was going to win easy. He was doing everything so well, and he got tired going to the third last, which was the ditch. You can say he made a mistake, but he just almost got in too tight to the fence and had a little blunder, but he was tired. And at that point I thought I was beat, but it was the courage he showed after that made me and everybody else think he was the real deal.
I was a bit very disappointed, obviously, when the result came, and we just had to accept it, really.
I did think I'd won. I think Ruby thought I'd won as well, and the man above must have been looking down at me, because I punched the air. I always make an idiot out of myself when I win a big race, and for some reason I just kept my hands down and thanked. I said to Ruby, I'm not sure, and he said well done, and Ruby genuinely thought he got beat, and it was a bit of a shock. It was hard to take at the time. It's such a hard race in that Betfair Chase. It was always a worry. It was always a worry that King George was maybe coming a fraction too soon, and he just jumped off, and it was everyone wanted to be handy, and it was quite tight going to the first, and we were all tightening each other up a bit, and I half got blinded, and he just made a mistake, and I was lucky to stay on him. Obviously
at the second fence, Deep Purple jumped across him, I think it was, and he made a bad mistake. And in a race like the King George, round the fastest track, if you do make a bad mistake and get behind, and he's probably not a horse that likes to be in that situation. He's quite a horse that sort of works well, maybe not so well other days, but so he makes up his own mind a little bit. And if he's up, he likes to be up there, fairly involved, and maybe just sort of thought, well, this isn't my day. And I mean, he did stay on as well at the end, so he didn't run too bad. But I agree, it's very, very difficult whether the track doesn't suit him. I think there are people in the stable that think sort of a lot of this sort of stuff is maybe not true, and that he can run a big race at Kempton, but we'll see.
The right-handed theory is absolute rubbish. He hit a fence halfway up, he got blinded at the second fence, knocked him out of the race. He ran a superb race to finish fifth.
I think I kind of agree with the sort of people that say, everybody are a little bit hasty to make up their mind whether a horse does or doesn't go right-handed, left-handed, whatever it is, and and ground as well. I think I think there's a possibility that he could still run a big race in the King George.
I thought right-handed was a problem till I rode him work 3 weeks before the Gold Cup last year, and he did an absolute unbelievable piece of work. Nothing crazy, but he went around it like, you know, he went right-handed so sweet that day. So again, like I said to you, if we could get him over 3 miles right-handed and he was in the form of his life, I still wouldn't rule it out.
One thing we are pretty confident of now is that he definitely needs a good 6, 7, 8 week break between races. His record when fresh is perfect, with the exception of obviously getting beaten by Cato at Haydock, but that is still a fantastic record for a horse first time out each season. So I think that that's the case.
For the first time, I think, he had a nice break between the King George and the Gold Cup, and then everything went so well between the King George and the Gold Cup. Absolutely everything went to plan, and I was very, very hopeful going into the race. I did lots of Cheltenham previews before Cheltenham, and I felt people you say, they talk about Dinman, Cato, Star, and which one would you like to ride, and I would not genuinely have swapped Imperial Commander for any horse in the race last year. It
was great for us because it took away the spotlight from us, put it on those 2 horses. I think it's going to be a lot harder if, touchwood, we get to the festival and go for the Gold Cup with a fit horse. It's going to be harder this time because we're obviously going to be a lot more talked about. But I think being the 3rd favourite kept us out of the spotlight, and that was quite nice because we always sort of quietly fancied him after Haydock in the Gold Cup. So I felt it was nice, but I'm not sure that I like the sort of fact that it was the scarves and everything else. Everybody sort of supporting one or the other, because I think that horse races, everyone's involved, and they should all have their fair chance and fair support.
I'm not a fan of scarves, as you've probably read. I don't think it has any place in national hunt racing. I think it's great for the sport. The sport is facing a lot of challenges right now. The prize money issue and the structure of the sport are in question. I think the real core of national hunt racing, when you get horses like Denman and Cato Star as superstars, and Imperial has come along and pitched himself into that, and the younger generation, the top chasers are just, they make the hairs in the back of your neck stand up. They have everything about them, and last year's Gold Cup came together in spectacular fashion.
It's a very straightforward race. Obviously the Gold Cup, there was, I think, 12 runners. There's plenty of room for everybody, and I'd said before, and the best horse is always going to win, barring mistakes, which obviously Cato Star made a bad mistake. And no, it was very straightforward. It couldn't have went any better.
Paddy just had him in a fantastic position throughout the race, and I thought that the ground, I think the rain helped us. I think the hour's rain just before the race probably did us a favour, because he likes a little bit of cut, and he just travelled supremely well. Nigel had him in absolutely amazing condition, and his training performance there was absolutely fantastic, and Paddy gave him a brilliant, perfect ride. He had him sort of 3rd, out of trouble on the outside, where he likes to be, involved in the race. He rode him as if he had plenty of stamina, rather than trying to conserve that, which was fantastic, really. And yes, I felt that during the race, it's very difficult, as I know, you tend to watch 1 or 2 things. I was just watching every single fence he jumped, and I knew that if he jumped well, he would have a big chance.
I was standing alongside my daughter, and I turned to her and said, "We've won this," as we were coming into the 3rd last, and she said, "Shut up. We've got 3 to jump, 2 to jump," as we pinged the 3rd. But he was, you just know when he's in that sort of form, he's going to come off that home turn. And Denman is a great horse, but he's not renowned for quickening at the end of his races. He tends to grind people or other horses into the ground, and he wasn't doing that to Imperial Commander on the day.
Commentator really for a lot of the way did talk about Denman and Cato, as you might expect, with all the publicity and hype, but he did actually say that Imperial Commander was coming on the bridle, which was a very exciting thing to hear in a Gold Cup, of course. And I did think at that point, when you've got a horse travelling that well, Denman had been given a couple of reminders, and I know that he would stay, but at the same time, when you're travelling that well, you've got to fancy your chances a little bit.
Just trying to keep it together. I just didn't want to panic, and if I didn't think about winning then, because I knew Denman, like, all he'd do is stay, and Tony Mackay's hard to get past on a Monday and Tuesday, like, and we're turning in behind him in a Gold Cup, and it's next to impossible. But no, the best horse won in the day, and Imperial Commander really showed me that day of all my dreams, and all I'd ever thought of him came true.
The Ryanair was very special because that was a dream to have a festival winner, Obviously, winning the Gold Cup was way beyond any dream that we could possibly have, because it is just so difficult to win, and it's still sort of sinking in, really. I think that, you know, every day I sort of think, did we really win that race? And it's hard. I don't think I'll ever really believe it. Actually, it's so fantastic. So,
because as I said to you earlier, I sometimes get a bit excited when I win, but it's just nice because you always have it up your sleeve, and it's for jockeys. You always have a little thing in your head, and it's nice. Just want to sort of say, listen, this lad's not too bad. I was never happy at entry, felt good going to the start, but again, like I said, he's a big horse. He just takes so much out of himself, and the money was there. There was only 5 or 6 runners. It's a tough industry, and we had to go and see what, he had a favourite chance. It just didn't work out on the day.
Well, again, he hit the second fence and knocked himself out. He's lost his confidence totally. So, but anyway, he's got his confidence back now. We've schooled him. He's going really well.
The plan at the moment is to go for the Betfair Chase, and then the King George, and then the Gold Cup. I think that's the plan that we've all agreed. But Nigel will obviously influence that plan if, for any reason, he feels it's necessary. But a lot of people might say, why go for the King George? But there aren't many races that a horse of his rating can run in. So it is very, very difficult. And it sort of worked for us last year in terms of the stepping stones to win the Gold Cup. So, maybe we don't necessarily win the King George, but we'll be doing our best. And as I say, if that changes, obviously Nigel will have a big influence on them.
He's got the Betfair, then the King George, and then the Gold Cup, and that will probably do this year.
Nigel has a very great record, an exceptional record with staying chasers. He knows how to treat a horse. He knows how to present horses ready for their races. He gets them fit. You've seen them working up the hill, and this was a nice jolly little canter today, but when they're made to work, they do come up there, so they're always fit and ready to race. The schooling and the preparation is serious, and it's they don't jump over fences every day, they don't jump over fences every week or month, but when they're schooled, they know their stuff, they know what they're meant to be doing. And then the horses seem to relax and enjoy themselves because they're actually laid out. Imperial Commander, we came up to see him the week before the Gold Cup, and he's turned out in the field, just happily standing there. You may have to edit this bit out, of course, because it may be a security risk. But the truth of the matter is, he's there and he's relaxed and he's enjoying himself, and it's just a fantastic thing to see. That's what they're meant to be like. Not living in the box. They come out, they roll about and play in the field.
I think any of the top trainers will get exactly the same tune out of him. He apart from his slight weaknesses that the odd lung problem or whatever, he's very easy to train.
He's a very clever trainer. He understands in a lot of cases he hasn't got horses to win mid-season races, so he deliberately gets them fit early. He deliberately goes out and gets the 40 or 50 on the board, and then he come back later season for a second go. But given the ammunition, there's nobody can equal him. In terms of the condition the horses are, and it's all done by eye. This isn't about science, it's not about weighing horses, it's about his eye for physically looking at the condition of a horse and how far to push it. And we own just about everything. Between himself and Ison and Kevin Ross, who look after the horse in the summer, everything Imperial's become is down to him. Richard Bevis, who rides him every day, and Joe Collinson, who tends to his every need, are a big part of it. And the team here is happy. If you look at Nigel, what he engenders out of his staff is loyalty, and they're all happy and they're all pulling towards one aim. And when it all comes together, there's no other trainer could produce what he produces. And I think if you looked at Imperial the year before in the Ryanair and look at him last year, just physically in the pictures, the development in the horse in 1 year is just phenomenal. Paddy
is a great jockey, but then Tony Evans is a very good jockey as well. Tony never had the opportunity to prove whether he's a great jockey or not on Imperial Commander, so we'd have to be cautious about that. But on the positive side, Paddy has done everything that's we could ever have dreamt of on the horse. He's given him every opportunity in every race, and even if you look at the King Georges, where we've not had particularly great races, There are reasons for it, and each time Paddy's presented him to have every chance. So, Paddy is up there with the very, very best jockeys in the country at the moment.
He's a brilliant horseman, and he knew what he was sitting on. I mean, in fairness, obviously we stuck with Tony Evans for a while out of loyalty. Tony's career ended because he couldn't get enough rides. Paddy was sitting in the stable, always rated Paddy as a jockey, but didn't realise how good he was until he sat in Imperial. I mean, he got off him after the Paddy Power, winning the Paddy Power 139, and said he'd win the Gold Cup. And people in the pub that night laughed at him, and they're not laughing now. He knew what he was sitting on, and he's always had confidence in the horse. He's always believed he was the best horse in the race. He's always wanted the horse to run and jump. I mean, it put the wind up me when he kicked off in front in the Gold Cup. But, that was Paddy. Let him jump a couple of fences and then I'll rein him back. He believes in the horse 100%, and that, with his riding ability, it is a combination, sort of dreamt up in heaven. And I think the other thing with Imperial, he's an easier ride over 3 mile 2 than he is over 2-4, because when you set him alight over 2-4, there's no clawing him back, and Paddy recognised that straight away. He was always confident he'd get the 3 mile 2 and he'd be an easier ride over that trip. So the partnership wasn't something that we scripted, but it just came together from the first day he sat on the horse. He believed 100%, and that counts for a lot.
For me, I only get, as I said to you earlier, I only get to sit in him when I come in school, and I don't get to sit in him an awful lot or see him an awful lot. Richard Bevis and Joe, who looks after him, obviously they see him every single day. But as a jockey, you never get that attached to him, and especially when they're as good as he is, because you don't get a lot of goes on him on the racetrack. So I would probably know Imperial Commander no better than any other horse here in the yard. But he certainly has a special place in my heart.